When they fired me in front of 20 coworkers, I didn't cry. I just remembered how he smiled while signing the termination papers, like I was a pawn being swept off his chessboard. The conference room felt like a courtroom, and I was guilty before trial. But that day, watching his smug face dismiss 6 years of my life, I made a decision. If I was going down, I'd take him with me. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Natalie Cross, and until 6 weeks ago, I believed hard work and loyalty meant something in corporate America. 34 years old. Born and raised in a town so small in Iowa that most people couldn't find it on a map. I'd clawed my way up from food stamps to a financial planning position at Orvitech Solutions, a medical technology company in Denver that promised to revolutionize healthcare diagnostics. Growing up poor teaches you to remember numbers. Every cent counted in our household, the difference between $1.89 and $2. 15 milk meant we might not have gas money that week. That survival skill became my superpower. I could recall financial figures from months ago without checking notes, spot discrepancies in 1,000-line spreadsheets that others missed, and build forecasting models in my head while others fumbled with calculators. For 6 years, I'd given Orvitech everything. First in the office at 6:30 a.m., last to leave after markets closed. I'd saved the company hundreds of thousands by catching vendor overcharges, optimizing our procurement processes, and negotiating better rates with suppliers. My annual reviews were flawless. Exceptional attention to detail. Invaluable team member. Goes above and beyond. But I was never promoted, never considered for the senior analyst position that opened twice during my tenure. Both times, it went to men with half my experience and none of my track record. I told myself to be patient. My time would come. Greg Lorne, our CFO, was everything corporate America rewards: tall, commanding presence, Harvard MBA prominently displayed in his corner office, and a smile that could charm board members while calculating exactly how expendable you were. He spoke in TED Talk soundbites and management consulting jargon, turning simple concepts into elaborate presentations that impressed executives who'd never worked in the trenches. He'd been pleasant enough when he started 3 years ago, even complimentary of my work. But gradually, I noticed a pattern. In meetings, he'd present my analyses as his own insights. When I'd email him findings directly, he'd forward them to the board without attribution. If I spoke up with ideas, he'd dismiss them gently. Let's table that for now, Natalie, only to resurrect them weeks later as his own revelations. I documented everything, of course. Date-stamped emails, meeting notes, project timelines showing my original work. But what was I going to do? Complain that my boss was taking credit? That's not how you survive in corporate culture. You keep your head down, do excellent work, and hope someone notices. The morning it all changed started like any other. October air crisp against my face as I walked from the parking garage, coffee in one hand, laptop bag weighing down my shoulder. I'd been working on a critical quarterly report, analyzing our R&D expenditure against market projections. The numbers were concerning, some allocations didn't align with stated project goals, but I figured it was above my pay grade to question strategic decisions. That was my first mistake. The second was trusting that competence and integrity would protect me in a system designed to protect those already in power. As I settled into my cubicle that morning, I had no idea that in 3 hours, I'd be escorted from the building like a criminal. My career at Orvitech destroyed in front of an audience of my peers. Or that Greg Lorne's satisfied smile would ignite something in me that all my Iowa nice girl upbringing had kept dormant. A cold, calculating desire for justice that would consume the next 6 weeks of my life. The email came at 9:47 a.m. Mandatory meeting, conference room A, 10 a.m., Greg Lorne. No subject line, no context. My stomach dropped the way it does when you know something's wrong but can't name it yet. I saved my work, straightened my blazer, and walked toward the executive conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see it was already packed. 20 or so colleagues from various departments, all looking confused. This wasn't our usual Monday staff meeting. Greg stood at the head of the table, papers spread before him like evidence in a trial. His expression was grave, performative, the face of a man about to deliver bad news he'd been rehearsing. Sarah from HR sat beside him, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Greg began as I took the last empty seat. "I'm afraid we have a serious matter to address. It's come to my attention that there's been a significant error in our Q3 financial reporting to the board." My fingers found the edge of the table. That was my report. The misstatement involves approximately $2.3 million. R&D allocations that were incorrectly categorized, potentially misleading our investors and putting the company at risk of SEC violations. His eyes found mine across the room. "Natalie, as the primary analyst on this report, can you explain how this happened?" The room turned to stare. 20 pairs of eyes, some sympathetic, others eager for drama. My throat constricted. "I'm not aware of any misstatement. The report you submitted," Greg interrupted, sliding papers across the table, "shows clear manipulation of expense categories. These aren't simple errors. Natalie, these are deliberate misrepresentations." I grabbed the papers with trembling hands. The numbers were wrong, completely wrong. Line items I'd never seen before, allocations that made no sense. But there it was, my digital signature at the bottom. Timestamp showing I'd allegedly submitted this version at 11:43 p.m. last Thursday. "This isn't my report," I said, voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. "Someone's altered it. I have the original files. The audit trail shows you were the only one who accessed this file." Greg's voice was silk over steel. "It confirmed it came from your login credentials. Then check my computer, check the version history. This isn't what I submitted." We did check. Sarah from HR finally spoke, her voice small. "The files on your system match what was sent to the board." The setup was perfect, surgical. Greg had learned my work patterns, knew I often worked late, knew I'd be the only one with access to those files. He'd probably been planning this for weeks, waiting for the right report, the right moment. "I'm afraid we have no choice," Greg continued, his tone shifting to wounded disappointment. "The integrity of our financial reporting is paramount. Effective immediately. Your employment with Orvitech is terminated." The words hit like physical blows. 6 years, perfect reviews, hundreds of overtime hours. Gone. "You can't do this," I said, standing up. "I want to speak to legal. I want an investigation. The decision is final." Greg nodded to 2 security guards I hadn't noticed entering. "These gentlemen will escort you to clear your desk. You have 15 minutes. The walk to my cubicle was the longest of my life. Colleagues pretended to be absorbed in their screens, but I could feel them watching, some with pity, others with relief. It wasn't them. The guards flanked me like I might steal something, which was ironic considering what had just been stolen from me. I dumped personal items into a box. Photos. My coffee mug with the motivational quote I now found nauseatingly naive. The stress ball shaped like a brain. My hands moved mechanically while my mind raced. This wasn't just about getting rid of me. Greg had fabricated a financial crime. Why? What was he hiding? As security marched me past the conference room, Greg was still there, chatting casually with department heads like he hadn't just destroyed someone's life. He caught my eye through the glass and smiled, not broadly, just a slight upturn of lips that said everything. "You were nothing. You are nothing." And I won. But as the elevator doors closed on my Orvitech career, something crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. Greg Lorne had made 2 critical mistakes. First, he'd underestimated me, seeing just another disposable analyst instead of someone who'd memorized every financial irregularity I'd noticed over the years. Second, and more importantly, he'd humiliated me. Not fired me quietly with a severance package and an NDA. Not pushed me out with a vague restructuring excuse. He'd made it a public execution, ensuring I'd never work in Denver's financial sector again, standing in that parking garage, holding a pathetic box of desk trinkets. I made a decision. Greg thought he'd destroyed me. Instead, He'd freed me. No more playing by corporate rules. No more keeping my head down. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd show him what a farm girl from Iowa could do when she had nothing left to lose. The first 48 hours after my termination were a blur of rage and wine. But by day 3, the fog cleared, replaced by cold calculation. Greg had been too perfect in his execution. Too prepared. That meant he'd been planning this, which meant there was something he desperately needed to hide. I started with Marcus Chen, my friend from IT who'd always helped with system glitches. We met at a dive bar in Capitol Hill, far from Orvitech's downtown towers. "I can't access company systems for you," Marcus said immediately, nervously spinning his beer. "They'd fire me." "I'm not asking you to. I just need to understand something." I leaned forward. How exactly could someone alter files on my computer and change the audit trail? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Theoretically, someone with admin access could remote in, modify files, and backdate changes. The audit log would show your credentials because they'd be using your active session. Who has that level of access? IT department heads, security team. He paused. And executives with special clearance, like the CFO. Bingo. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a forensic accountant working my own case. I'd kept personal copies of many reports, a violation of company policy. But my paranoia had finally paid off. Spreading papers across my apartment floor, I reconstructed every project I'd worked on under Greg. That's when I noticed the pattern. Small discrepancies I'd attributed to rounding errors or timing differences. Vendor payments that were just slightly higher than invoiced amounts. Consulting fees to companies I couldn't verify. Always small enough to fly under radar. But consistent. My photographic memory for numbers became my weapon. I could recall conversations where Greg had specifically directed me to correct certain entries. The breakthrough came from LinkedIn. Late one night, fueled by coffee and determination. I was researching the consulting firms that received suspicious payments. One company, Meridian Advisory Services, had no website, no employees, no digital footprint except incorporation papers. But the registered agent's name seemed familiar. Then it hit me. Jennifer Walsh. I'd seen that name on Greg's phone once when a text popped up during a meeting. The message had been intimate. A former colleague had mentioned Greg's messy divorce, his affair with someone named Jen. I dove deeper. Meridian Advisory Services was incorporated just 2 months after Greg joined Orvitech. Over 2 years, they'd received $247,000 in consulting fees for services that, as far as I could tell, never happened. Another shell company, Phoenix Solutions, had collected $193,000. A third, Atlas Consulting Group, showed $118,000 in payments. My hands shook as I tallied the total, $558,000, siphoned to shell companies, all authorized by Greg Lorne. But evidence wasn't enough. Greg had shown me that corporate justice didn't exist for people like me. I needed allies. I remembered Jasmine Ortega, a brilliant analyst who'd left Orvitech abruptly a year ago. She'd been in line for a promotion until Greg arrived and restructured her department. We'd lost touch, but LinkedIn showed she was now at Catalyst Capital, a venture firm. We met for coffee in Lodo. Jasmine looked different, more confident, expensive suit, the bearing of someone who'd landed on their feet. "I heard what happened," she said without preamble. Classic Greg. He tried something similar with me, but I saw it coming and got out first. I showed her my findings. Her eyes widened with each shell company, each fraudulent invoice. "Holy shit, Natalie, this is embezzlement. Major embezzlement. I need to get this to the board, but they won't listen to a disgraced ex-employee." Jasmine stirred her latte thoughtfully. "Catalyst is considering a major investment in Orvitech. We're in due diligence phase." A smile played at her lips. "It would be irresponsible of me not to share concerns about financial irregularities with my partners." "Can you?" "I can't take your documents directly." But if an anonymous whistleblower were to send comprehensive evidence to our compliance department, we'd be obligated to investigate before investing $50 million. That night, I compiled everything. Bank records showing the shell companies led to accounts controlled by Jennifer Walsh. Incorporation documents with digital signatures traced to IP addresses at Greg's home. A timeline showing how each fraudulent payment coincided with legitimate large transactions hidden in the noise. But I wanted more than just Catalyst's attention. The board needed to see this directly, undeniably, in a way Greg couldn't spin or suppress. That's when I remembered something. Orvitec's whistleblower clause. Buried in the employee handbook was a provision allowing former employees to report financial wrongdoing directly to the board's audit committee through an external law firm. It was designed to prevent exactly what Greg had done, executives silencing those who might expose them. I spent my last savings on a lawyer who specialized in corporate whistleblowing. He reviewed my evidence, eyes growing wider with each page. "This is airtight," he said. "With this documentation, they'll have no choice but to investigate. And if they don't, they're looking at massive liability." As I signed the papers to submit my whistleblower complaint, I thought about Greg's smile in that conference room. He thought he was untouchable, protected by his Harvard degree and executive privilege. He was about to learn what happened when you backed a farm girl into a corner. We might not have had much growing up, but we learned to fight with whatever we had. And what I had was the truth. The waiting was agony. 3 weeks passed with no word from the board or my lawyer. I'd refreshed my email hundreds of times, jumped at every phone notification, barely slept. My savings were nearly gone, and recruiters who'd eagerly courted me before now wouldn't return my calls. Greg had done his work well. Word travels fast in Denver's financial community. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by evidence I'd memorized backward and forward. Was I delusional? Had I misunderstood innocent transactions? The doubt crept in like fog, making me question everything. But then I'd remember $558,000, shell companies, Jennifer Walsh, the precision of Greg's attack on me. No, I wasn't crazy. I was dangerous to him. And that's why he destroyed me. Jasmine called the next morning. Catalyst's board meeting is tomorrow. My managing partner wants to discuss concerns about Orvitec's financial controls. Very subtle, right? Her voice dropped. "Natalie, what you found? It's causing ripples. People are asking questions." That afternoon, my lawyer finally called. "The audit committee acknowledged receipt of your complaint. They're launching an internal investigation. But Greg will know it's me. Whistleblower protections don't apply to people he's already destroyed." I laughed bitterly. What's he going to do? Fire me again? Still, fear gnawed at me. Greg had connections everywhere. What if he sued me for defamation? What if the investigation found nothing? I'd seen how easily he'd manipulated evidence before. I decided I needed insurance. More allies, more pressure points. I reached out to 3 former Orvitec employees who'd left abruptly during Greg's tenure. 2 didn't respond, but the third, David Kim from procurement, agreed to meet. "I always wondered about those vendor contracts," he said over Korean barbecue in Aurora. Greg insisted on personally approving certain payments, bypassed normal channels. When I questioned it, my performance review tanked. I got the message and found another job. He gave me names of other vendors worth investigating. That night, I found 2 more shell companies I'd missed. Another $200,000 in suspicious payments. The pattern was clear. Greg had been bleeding Orvitec systematically, carefully, hiding his theft in the complexity of legitimate business. My phone rang at 6 p.m. on Thursday. Unknown number. "Ms. Cross? This is Patricia Hammond from Whitman & Associates. I'm outside counsel for Orvitec's board. Are you available to meet tomorrow morning?" My heart hammered. "Yes." "Good. Our offices, 9 a.m. Bring any documentation you haven't already submitted." I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to my original Orvitec interview 6 years ago. It still fit perfectly, though everything else in my life had changed. The law firm occupied the top floor of a building overlooking the Rockies. Patricia Hammond was everything I wasn't. Tall, silver-haired, radiating the confidence of someone who'd never been powerless. But her handshake was firm, and her eyes were kind. "Ms. Cross, I've reviewed your submission. It's comprehensive." She gestured to a conference table where my documents were spread out, marked with colored tabs. "The board takes these allegations very seriously." For 3 hours, I walked her through everything, every shell company, every fraudulent invoice, every pattern I'd identified. She asked sharp questions, pushed for details, made me defend my conclusions. It felt like defending a dissertation, except my career, and maybe my freedom, hung in the balance. "One thing puzzles me," she said finally. "Why didn't you raise these concerns while you were employed?" I met her eyes. "Would you have believed a junior analyst over the CFO? Besides, I only connected the dots after he destroyed my credibility. Funny how unemployment gives you time to see patterns you missed before." She almost smiled. "The board will need to verify your claims independently, if what you're alleging is true." "It is true." "Then Orvitec has a serious problem, and Mr. Lorne has a bigger one." As I left, she handed me a card. "My direct line. If anyone contacts you about this, anyone at all, call me immediately. The board is treating this as highly confidential." But secrets have a way of spreading. That evening, Jasmine texted, "Catalyst just pulled out of the Orvitec deal. Concerns about financial governance. My partner is pissed about the wasted due diligence." The next morning, my LinkedIn exploded with views. People from Orvitec, from competing firms, from media companies. Someone knew something. The financial community was buzzing, even if they didn't know why yet. Then Marcus called, whispering, "Greg's been locked out of his computer. It was told to preserve all his files. Security's been stationed outside his office. What did you do?" I hadn't done anything except tell the truth. But the truth, when documented and delivered to the right people, was more powerful than any weapon. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a promotion that never came. I toasted my empty apartment, my depleted savings, my destroyed career. Because none of that mattered anymore. Greg Lorne thought he'd crushed an ant. Instead, he'd awakened someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The investigation was just beginning, but I could feel the momentum shifting. For the first time in 2 months, I slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight I'd won the first round. Monday morning, 7:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check the Denver Business Journal. A friend." My hands trembled as I pulled up the website. There it was, top of the business section. Orvitec CFO Greg Lorne placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The article was carefully worded, citing internal review of financial procedures and routine governance matters. But the timing told the real story. In corporate speak, administrative leave was one step from execution. Patricia Hammond called an hour later. "Ms. Cross, I need you to understand something. The investigation has taken on a life of its own. Forensic accountants will be contacting you. Federal investigators may get involved. Are you prepared for that?" Federal investigators. The words sent ice through my veins. I just wanted my job back. Maybe an apology. It's too late for that. What you uncovered. It's not just termination worthy, it's criminal. I spent the day fielding calls from reporters who'd somehow gotten my number. No comment became my mantra, even as they pressed with increasingly specific questions. Someone was leaking, and they were leaking hard. Tuesday brought a formal interview with Orvitec's forensic accounting team. They'd taken over an entire floor of a downtown hotel, transforming it into a financial war room. Boxes of documents lined the walls. Multiple computers ran analysis programs. It looked like a FBI raid in progress. The lead investigator, Sandra Martinez, was all business. We've confirmed shell companies totaling $758,000 in fraudulent transfers. Your documentation was remarkably accurate. $758,000, more than I'd found. The scope kept growing. We need to understand your role in these transactions, she continued. Greg Lorne's attorney is claiming you were complicit, that you helped structure these payments and are now trying to save yourself. The accusation hit like a slap. That's insane. He fired me publicly, humiliated me. To create distance, he claims, to make you look like a victim rather than a co-conspirator. I wanted to scream, even now, even caught red-handed. Greg was trying to drag me down with him, but I had something he didn't expect. Obsessive record-keeping and a memory that could recall every interaction. For 6 hours, I walked them through every email, every meeting, every moment Greg had overridden my concerns. I showed them my original reports versus his edited versions. I provided timestamps proving I was in Iowa visiting family when several suspicious transfers were authorized from my supposed computer. By the end, Sandra's expression had shifted from skeptical to sympathetic. He really thought he'd covered everything, didn't he? Wednesday. Jasmine forwarded me an internal Orvitech email that was making rounds. Emergency all-hands meeting scheduled for Thursday. Mandatory attendance. CEO flying in from New York. That night, I couldn't eat. Everything was moving too fast. I'd wanted justice, but this felt bigger than justice. This felt like an earthquake, and I was standing at the epicenter. Thursday, 2 p.m. I sat in my apartment, refreshing news sites obsessively. Then it broke. Orvitech CFO Gregory Lorne terminated following discovery of $1.2 million embezzlement scheme. $1.2 million. They'd found even more. The articles detailed a sophisticated fraud involving shell companies, fabricated invoices, and unauthorized transfers spanning 3 years. Jennifer Walsh was named as a co-conspirator. Both faced potential federal charges. My phone exploded. Texts from former colleagues. Holy shit, Natalie. You're a hero. I knew something was off. Hero? I didn't feel like a hero. I felt exhausted, vindicated, and strangely empty. Marcus called, breathless. You should see the office. It's chaos. FBI agents in the C-suite. They're seizing computers. Greg's office is wrapped in crime scene tape. Actual crime scene tape. That evening, Patricia Hammond called with an update. The board wants to meet with you tomorrow. They have a proposal. I don't want my job back. I don't think that's what they're offering. Friday morning, I walked into Orvitech's boardroom for the first time. 6 months ago, I would have been intimidated by the mahogany table, the oil paintings, the view of the mountains. Now I just felt tired. The board chairman, Robert Steinberg, looked like he'd aged a decade in a week. Ms. Cross, we owe you an apology. What happened to you was unconscionable. What you uncovered saved this company from catastrophic damage. I stayed silent. Apologies were nice, but they didn't pay rent. We're prepared to offer you a settlement, he continued. Full reinstatement with back pay, a promotion to senior financial analyst, and... He slid a paper across the table. Additional compensation for the distress caused? The number had 6 figures. Enough to make me whole, enough to start over. And if I don't want to come back? The financial settlement stands, plus a glowing recommendation and our assurance that your reputation will be fully restored in the business community. I looked around the room at these powerful people who'd let Greg run wild until I'd forced their hand. I'll take the settlement and the recommendation, but I'm done with Orvitech. As I signed the papers, Robert asked quietly, "How did you know where to look? What made you suspect him?" I thought about it. He smiled when he fired me, like he'd won something. People who've really won don't need to smile like that. Walking out of Orvitech for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone was full of messages from recruiters suddenly eager to talk. 3 companies wanted interviews next week. Portland firms, San Francisco startups, even a nonprofit focused on financial transparency. Greg Lorne was facing federal charges. Jennifer Walsh had been arrested. The FBI had frozen their assets. The man who'd smiled while destroying my career would be trading his Armani suits for federal prison khakis. Justice served cold tastes just as sweet. The Denver Post ran the story on page 1 of the business section. Former Orvatec CFO Gregory Lorne indicted on 37 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement. The accompanying photo showed Greg in handcuffs. His Harvard confidence finally cracked. I stared at it over morning coffee, waiting to feel something. Satisfaction? Victory? Instead, I felt oddly detached, like watching a movie I'd already seen. The final tally was staggering: $147 million stolen over 3 years through an elaborate network of shell companies. Investigators found offshore accounts, cryptocurrency transfers, luxury purchases hidden through corporate expenses. Greg hadn't just been skimming, he'd been running a full-scale looting operation. Local news wanted interviews. National outlets called. Whistleblower exposes million-dollar fraud made for compelling headlines. I declined them all. This wasn't about fame. It never was. 2 weeks after the indictment, something unexpected happened. Orvatec's stock price, which had initially dropped 12% on news of the scandal, rebounded and climbed higher than before. Investors saw a company that had cleaned house, strengthened controls, and dealt decisively with corruption. The board's quick action, prompted by my revelation, had actually increased market confidence. Robert Steinberg called, personally. Our shares are up 18% from pre-scandal levels. You didn't just expose a crime, Ms. Cross. You saved the company. I wasn't trying to save anything. I just wanted the truth known. Nevertheless, the board has approved an additional gratitude payment. Another 6 figures landed in my account the next day. Blood money. Maybe. But I'd earned it in blood. The trial date was set for spring. Federal prosecutors subpoenaed me as their key witness. The preparation sessions were grueling, hours of reviewing documents, practicing testimony, anticipating defense strategies. Greg had hired the best lawyers money could buy, ironically, with money he'd stolen. But the evidence was overwhelming. My documentation, combined with the FBI's forensic accounting, created an inescapable net. Jennifer Walsh had already pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against him. Rats fleeing sinking ships. The day before I was scheduled to testify, Greg's lawyer contacted mine with a plea deal offer. He'd admit to everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecutor called me, asking my thoughts. Take it, I said without hesitation. I don't need to see him in court. I just needed him stopped. Greg Lorne pled guilty to all charges. 7 years federal prison. $1.47 million in restitution. Lifetime ban from serving as a corporate officer. The man who'd worn $3,000 suits would spend the next decade in federal khaki. The news coverage was extensive but brief. Another corporate criminal, another scandal, another day in American business. Within a month, new headlines pushed Greg's story to the archives. But in Denver's financial community, the ripples continued. Orvatec implemented new controls, hired ethics officers, created anonymous reporting systems. Other companies quietly reviewed their own procedures, suddenly worried about what their own CFOs might be hiding. I started getting calls from corporate boards, compliance departments, audit committees. Would I consult on fraud prevention? Could I review their financial controls? My destruction had become my calling card, the analyst who'd brought down a corrupt CFO. 3 months after Greg's sentencing, I stood in my empty Denver apartment, boxes packed for Portland. I'd accepted a position with a nonprofit that investigated financial crimes affecting pension funds and public investments. Less money than corporate consulting, but clean money. Money that helped protect people like my parents, whose retirement savings were often the target of corporate theft. As movers loaded my possessions, I found the box from my Orvatec desk, the one security had watched me pack that humiliating day. The motivational coffee mug was still there. Success is the best revenge. I threw it in the trash. Success wasn't revenge. Justice was revenge. Truth was revenge. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Cross. I'm a financial analyst at Techstar Industries. I think my CFO is committing fraud, but I'm scared to report it. Could we talk? I smiled, not Greg's predatory smile, but something cleaner. Yes, I typed back. Let's talk. The movers finished loading. I took one last look at the Denver skyline, those glass towers full of Greg Lornes who hadn't been caught yet. Then I got in my car and headed west, toward Portland and a new life built on the ashes of my old one. Greg thought he'd destroyed me by taking my job. Instead, he'd given me a purpose. Every corrupt executive I helped expose, every stolen dollar I helped recover, would be a reminder that sometimes the powerless could win. Sometimes. All it took was someone willing to remember the numbers, document the truth, and refuse to stay silent. Sometimes, all it took was someone with nothing left to lose. Portland suited me. The rain felt honest after Denver's manufactured sunshine. My office at the Financial Justice Initiative overlooked the Willamette River, where I could watch boats pass while reviewing cases of corporate theft that targeted the vulnerable. 2 years had passed since that morning. Greg Lorne smiled while signing my termination papers. 2 years since I'd sat in that conference room, surrounded by colleagues who'd watched my professional execution in silence. The woman who'd walked out of Orvatech carrying a cardboard box seemed like a stranger now, someone I'd known once but couldn't quite remember being. My work had meaning here. Last month, we'd exposed a scheme where nursing home executives were siphoning Medicare funds meant for patient care. The month before, we'd uncovered a contractor defrauding veteran benefit programs. Each case reminded me why I'd turned down lucrative corporate offers to work for a fraction of my potential salary. "Natalie, you have a visitor," my assistant announced one drizzly Thursday afternoon. I looked up from a spreadsheet analyzing suspicious municipal bond transactions. "I don't have any appointments." She says she's from Orvatech, Sarah Winters from HR. Sarah, who'd sat silently next to Greg that morning, avoiding everyone's eyes while my career burned. I almost sent her away. Then curiosity won. She looked older, grayer, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, clutching her purse like armor. I needed to apologize. In person. "It's been 2 years, Sarah." "I know. I've thought about that morning every day since." Her voice cracked. I knew something was wrong. The way Greg had it modify those files, the way he coached me on what to say. I knew. And I said nothing. I studied her. This woman who'd been another cog in Greg's machine. "Why didn't you speak up?" "I had 2 kids in college, a mortgage, 20 years until retirement." She laughed bitterly. "All the reasons that sound so pathetic now. After you exposed him, I couldn't look at myself. I quit last month. What do you want from me? Absolution?" "No, I want to help. I've been documenting every executive manipulation I witnessed over 15 years. Not just Greg. Others who are still there, still operating. I thought maybe..." She pulled out a flash drive. "Maybe someone who actually has courage could use this." I took the drive, feeling its weight. "You know this could implicate you too." "Good. I'm tired of being complicit." After she left, I sat alone as rain streaked my window. The flash drive contained exactly what she'd promised. A roadmap of corporate manipulation, petty corruptions, lives destroyed for quarterly earnings. Some names I recognized, others were new players in old games. I thought about the 20 colleagues who'd watched my humiliation in silence. How many had seen signs? How many had chosen comfort over conscience? Sarah was just one who'd finally found her voice. 2 years too late, but perhaps not too late for the next victim. My phone rang. "Natalie, it's Robert Steinberg from Orvatech." "The board chairman? Interesting. Mr. Steinberg." "I wanted you to know. Greg Lorne was denied early release yesterday. He'll serve his full sentence." I hadn't heard. I hadn't been tracking Greg's incarceration. He'd become irrelevant the moment justice was served. "Also, we've implemented something called the Cross Protocol, mandatory whistleblower training for all employees, named in your honor. Every quarter, we remind staff that speaking truth to power isn't just allowed, it's required. The cross protocol. My name attached to corporate courage. The irony wasn't lost on me. That's unexpected. You changed us. Natalie changed me. I should have seen what Greg was doing. We all should have. Your courage exposed our cowardice. After we hung up, I inserted Sarah's flash drive into my secure laptop. Name after name, scheme after scheme. Tomorrow, I'd begin the careful work of verification, documentation, building cases that could withstand legal scrutiny. But tonight, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a single photo, me on my first day at Orvitech, bright-eyed and eager, believing hard work and loyalty would be enough. That woman had needed to die for this one to be born. Greg Lorne had taught me the most valuable lesson of my career, in corporate America. Playing by the rules only works if everyone else is too. When they break the rules, you don't get even. You get evidence. I looked out at Portland's lights reflecting on the river, somewhere in some gleaming office tower. Another Greg Lorne was doctoring numbers, destroying careers, believing himself untouchable. Somewhere, another Natalie Cross was being shown the door, humiliated and discarded. But maybe, just maybe, she'd remember my story. Remember that documentation beats reputation. That truth, properly deployed, could topple titans. That sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what really mattered. The rain had stopped. The river flowed on, indifferent and eternal. I saved my work, shut down my computer, and prepared to go home. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new corruptions to expose. Tonight, I was at peace. Greg Lorne had created his own destroyer, teaching me through cruelty what kindness never could have, that justice wasn't given, it was taken. And I'd become very, very good at taking it. The woman who'd believed in corporate fairy tales was gone. In her place stood someone harder, smarter, unafraid. Someone who knew that in the war between truth and power, truth could win if you were willing to fight for it. Greg's smile that morning had promised to destroy me. Instead, it had set me free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced injustice at work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments.